Traveling in style, escorted by Skinner's horse from Meerut to Delhi, Bishop Heber passed through Ghaziuddin Nagar, now known as Ghaziabad. He noticed that the entire area was extremely poor, lined with ruins, the groves neglected, and the cultivation slovenly. The people looked half starved and quite heartbroken. He also realized this was most likely related to the usurious pattern of taxation by the East India Company. As I drive through on a spanking new 6 lane highway, the entire road is lined with large multi story towers and clearly extremely prosperous. But in this wannabe New York, I come across a ziggurat of trash, Asia's largest trash heap. Bishop Heber crossed a branch of the Yamuna that used to flow between Salimgarh and Red Fort. That branch of the Yamuna is long gone, and its place is a highway. But somehow the bridge connecting the Red Fort to Salimgarh still survives. Delhi, the capital of India, was a large and fine walled city, very much Mughal in its identity, one that Aurangzeb would have recognized instantly. With its high minarets and gilded domes of the many mosques, Bishop Heber thought the city far exceeded Moscow. This was a cultural cauldron in the 1820s, an intersection of Indian Orientalism and British imperialism. There were many white Mughals like Ochterlony, Robert Smith, and William Fraser. Unfortunately, this era was transient, and by the visit of the bishop, it was clear that the British were starting to see themselves as separate and superior. The first place the Bishop Heber went to in Delhi was the British residency, and this is where he stayed for the duration of his visit. This graceful building, with its Ionian columns, retains a lot of its original character. The British residency was set up here by David Ochterlony, who modified an older building. It is quite likely that the famous painting of David Ochterlony enjoying a notch, which highlights the hybrid elements of the society at the time, took place right here. But on the rear of the building, the Mughal origins can be clearly discerned, and this is an old Haveli with a storied history even for Delhi. Originally the property of Ali Mardan Khan, a prominent noble at the time of Shah Jahan. This passed on to Dara Shikoh, who had his library here. Jahanara lived in this Haveli after her reconciliation with Aurangzeb, and this is where she found suitors for the orphan daughters of Dara Shikoh and Murad. For a time, in the early post-Aurangzeb period, this Haveli was owned by a Portuguese lady called Donna Juliana, who also tried to cure Farrukhsiyar of his famous fistula. Remained a prized asset in the hands of later Mughals, passing through the Awadh Nawabs. This is the building from where Shah Alam made a daring escape out of the clutches of Imadul Mulk, making his way to Bengal, the journey that culminated in the loss of Battle of Buxar. This entire place reminded Bishop Heber of a university, and the university indeed is what it is today. The building has been lovingly restored, and inside, the Mughal origins and the Mughal colonnades are now visible. Today, this functions as a museum dedicated of all things to the partition of India, an extremely painful episode in the history of the country. Dara Shikoh would probably never have condoned the partition. dressed stylishly with a cape billowing in the wind. A one eyed rickshaw driver takes me to Old Delhi in his really fast e rickshaw. After taking over from the Marathas in 1803, the British had refurbished and revamped the walls and the gateways and made this whole place much more defensible. Today, just a few of the gates remain, marooned as traffic islands and completely entangled in wires. The streets of Old Delhi, narrow and cramped, must have enjoyed quite an extraordinary renaissance when Bishop Heber was here, owing to the stability of the British rule. In these crowded neighborhoods, there are still areas of stunning simplicity and beauty. We know that Bishop Heber used the paintings of Sitaram as kind of like a guidebook of the time, so of course he made his way to Kalan Masjid. This is a work of great antiquity, he thought, solid and plain and without a minaret. Completely encircled today by newer construction, with crowded streets leading up to it, the mosque is still instantly recognizable and preserves a unique dignity. Looking away from the gate of the mosque at the top of the stairs, I see an incredibly claustrophobic warren of streets that make up Old Delhi today. There is a small cat that's hiding in the shadows. No trip to Delhi would be complete without a visit to the Jama Masjid. It remains a landmark, its domes easily visible far away from the small alleyways that constitute Old Delhi. Built in the 1650s by Shah Jahan on a pre existing hillock, this was long a cultural center of Delhi. The steps would have been lined with kebab sellers and storytellers. In 1857, this became a focal point of the revolt. Many of the notices related to the revolt itself were stuck on its gates to give them wide visibility.
By the late 1700s, this mosque, already 150 years old at the time, had fallen into disrepair. The British paid to restore and maintain the mosque.
You see, the British had a nagging need to be liked and feared at the same time, and the measure of mosque restoration was very popular among the Muslim inhabitants of Delhi.
After 1857, the British converted this into a barracks and deliberately desecrated this sacred space. They came close to destroying it. It was only restored to local people in 1862 after numerous appeals. The announcement of the restoration happened on the same day as the announcement of Bahadur Shah Zafar's death. The British needed to be seen as a civilizing force, generously bestowing their benefactions on savages. But if their fury was provoked, they could take the avatar of avenging angels. This mosque saw them as foes.
Delhi's principal streets, Bishop Heber says, are really wide, handsome, and for an Asiatic city, remarkably clean. The shops in the bazaar have a good appearance. The chief street down which the bishop drove is called the Chandni Chowk. This street was laid out by Jahanara herself, and at the time there was a branch of the aqueduct running along the center.
Water was always a problem in Delhi. When Shah Jahan built his new capital, he had his nobleman Ali Mardan Khan renovate the old Ferozshah Canal. This canal brought water from the Yamuna more than 100 kilometers away to Delhi. A branch of the canal ran right through the middle of the Chandni Chowk street market, right where I'm standing today. The canal had fallen into disrepair, and the British repaired and restored it to general acclaim of the local population that came out in droves to celebrate the reopening of the canal. In 1857, when the British took back Delhi, this entire area was littered with bodies piled high.
But as I learned, and as Bishop Heber knew, this area was no stranger to massacres. A short way down the length of Chandni Chowk, Bishop Heber found a pretty little mosque with its three gilt domes. This is the Sunehri Masjid or the Mosque of Roshan-ud-Dawla, long a landmark of this street.
From the parapet of this mosque with its three golden domes, now barely visible from the street, in 1739, Nadir Shah ordered a general massacre of the people of Delhi. Angered by rioting the day before, which killed a few of his soldiers, 20,000 lives were lost before Nadir Shah agreed to stop the massacre.
This Persian psychopath then proceeded to loot Delhi of as much as he could carry back to Persia. The massacre and the loot that followed was really the beginning of the end for the Mughal Empire. The British were clearly aware of the massacres of Nadir Shah and the scar it had left on the psyche of Delhi and its people. In 1857, after winning the Battle of Delhi, they erected a gallows right next door.
Cigar puffing British soldiers paid the executioner to prolong the execution to watch what they called the Pandy's hornpipe. Thousands were killed, and many thousands more were branded, tortured, or maimed. And then the civilizing force started a massive loot of Delhi. Walls were broken, floors were dug, every single item of value was taken from this place.
The loot was done with typical British bureaucratic precision. Price agents were appointed, and every single thing of value was stripped. Today, after decades of indifference, Chandni Chowk is being restored. It is now mostly pedestrian and lined with shops, restaurants, and religious places.
This entire area is an extraordinary testament to Indian religious diversity. Right next to the mosque and the Sikh temple and a loud Hindu temple, there is also a Jain temple, replete with its bird hospital.
Bishop Heber passed by Ferozshah Kotla, or Old Delhi as it was then known. This is one of the seven cities of Delhi, founded by Ferozshah Tughlaq in the 1350s. It was subsequently cannibalized extensively by Shah Jahan for building his capital of Delhi, which is now known as Old Delhi. Not much is left here, not much was there when Bishop visited. But in its time, it was the envy of the world. It is said that Timur Lane modeled his mosque in Samarkand after the mosque here, which is in complete ruins. The highlight of this place is, of course, the Ashokan pillar.
The Ashokan pillar on top of Ferozshah Kotla was brought here, carefully wrapped in silk and cotton from Meerut. Ferozshah Kotla intended this to be kind of like a cherry on top of his brand new palace. The story of the pillar was completely lost to the bishop. It was a few decades later, after the Brahmi script was deciphered by James Prinsep, that finally the Ashokan history of this pillar came to light.
This sandstone pillar must have had a very bright polish, must have shone in the sun. But today, thanks to Delhi's pollution, there is a clear layer of filth on the pillar. Like many other monuments in India, it is out of bound to tourists. A zoom lens is the closest I can get to this incredible historic document. The palace of the present Imperial Company in Mehrauli is a large but paltry building in a bad style of Italian architecture with a public road actually leading through the courtyard. This is what Bishop Heber thought of Zafar Mahal, the palace of the later Mughals in Mehrauli. This was their summer residence where they would come during the monsoons. Situated on a busy flight path, Zafar Mahal is atmospheric and quiet and nearly completely forgotten. I come to Zafar Mahal to visit the most poignant Mughal monument of all. Like most other minor Mughal monuments, it has been progressively decaying. Part of it was damaged during riots at the time of partition, something that distressed Mahatma Gandhi himself. These are the graves of Akbar Shah, the emperor that Bishop Heber met, and his father, Shah Alam, the man blinded by Ghulam Qadir. Next to their graves is a small patch of grass. This is where the grave of Bahadur Shah Zafar was supposed to be. The star attraction in Mehrauli, then as now, is Qutub Minar. This tower built in the late 1200s. But this is as close as I'm gonna come to it. Bishop Heber was able to climb to the top, but for the last many decades, access to this monument is severely restricted. Nearby, to one of the world's richest archaeological sites, the Mehrauli Archaeological Park. Thickly wooded and devoid of visitors, this contains many treasures, including the tomb and mosque of Jamali Kamali. It is of this structure that Bishop Heber likely said, "These Pathans built like giants, but finished like jewelers." This little mosque is like a little jewel. That really is a history book. I find one last history lesson, that 92 people from Mehrauli and nearby Badarpur gave up their lives for the British in the First World War in the cause of freedom. Today, Humayun's tomb is a beautifully restored UNESCO heritage site. The entire area is green, lush, and verdant.
This magnificent tomb was mostly in ruin by the time Bishop got here. The water systems had long gone into disrepair. There was only a small terrace where wheat was being cultivated.
These old photographs document the bad state of the entire complex and how much work has gone into restoration, a project that continues even today. The water features have also been restored with spectacular results. This monument, made mostly of sandstone, glows in the evening sky with the pleasant accompaniment of birdsong. The occasional honk from the trains passing nearby sounds pleasant as well. Once lined with rich carpets and wall hangings, even a shamiana, and containing the shoes, the swords, and personal possessions of Humayun, the sparse central chamber today seems austere and somehow inappropriate to the colorful life of this unfortunate prince, the man who almost drowned in the Ganga at Chausa, rescued by a water carrier, lost the empire, wandered in exile, and regained it.
This entire area was sacred ground for the Mughals, given its proximity to Nizamuddin, and there are many Mughal tombs scattered around here, including somewhere in this building, that of Dara Shikoh, the unfortunate son of Shah Jahan and the brother of Aurangzeb. This building is magnificent in its scale and perfect in its symmetry. But the one thing that I remember about this place always is that this is where Bahadur Shah Zafar was taken prisoner by William Hodson, who promised him his life. He later came back and took Bahadur Shah Zafar's sons from here and killed them.
A short distance from Humayun's tomb, a walk through a dense urban village and through marble lined corridors filled with little shops and lined with pilgrims brings one to the tomb of Hazrat Nizamuddin, long an object of veneration in Delhi. Bishop Heber visited this tomb on 30th December 1824. Known for his message of love and his disdain of empires and emperors and of everyone in power, and his proximity to the common man, this tomb has reverted very much to being the haunt of the common man. Every time I come here, it is crowded and full of throngs looking for cures for all their problems. The tomb itself is perfectly proportioned and gloriously lit on most nights. There is often music in the courtyard. Many Mughals are buried here, perhaps hoping to benefit spiritually from proximity to the saint. Jahanara, the unfortunate daughter of Shah Jahan and sister of Aurangzeb, has her simple grave here. She was profoundly spiritual. She was also profoundly rich. She owned the port of Surat, and the maritime trade and transport of pilgrims was very lucrative. On the wrong side of the brutal succession war between Dara Shikoh and Aurangzeb, Jahanara nursed her father after he was deposed. After the death of Shah Jahan, she regained favor with the court but spent most of her time in religiosity, becoming a learned Sufi, and was remembered as a great benefactor of the poor and religious, and died with the reputation of a saint. Right next to her is the tomb of Muhammad Shah Rangila, who was definitely not a saint, as implied in his name.
This entire complex seems to be the spiritual heart of Delhi. Bishop Heber witnessed this small mausoleum that is right next to me being built for Mirza Jahangir, the petulant son of Akbar Shah. I wonder what the artists building this tomb must have thought.
गजरा अंधेरा तेरी जलती लो कल तेरा मिला जो तेरे दरबार से ओ मौला मौला छाप तिलक सब नैना मिला छाप तिलक सब Bishop Heber passed by and stopped at Safdarjung tomb at least a couple of times. Then, as now, this was on an important road. It was here that he was met by horsemen of the Raja of Ballabgarh, who was trying to be very friendly with the British at the time. Built in the 1750s, commissioned by Nawab Shuja-ud-Dawla in memory of his father Safdarjung, who was the premier of the Mughal Empire in its waning days. Safdarjung's tomb has been cannibalized from many of the surrounding monuments in this area, often thought of as the last major Mughal monument with its Charbagh garden. Described by some critics as an elderly courtesan, I find the tomb very photogenic in the afternoon light.
It seems like no one has anything good to say about Safdarjung's tomb. The bishop thought the stone was too much the color of potted meat for his liking. Others have likened this tomb to an elderly courtesan. To me, this tomb, designed interestingly by an Ethiopian architect, is pretty remarkable when looked at its own merits.
The complete absence of crowds, which are thronging the nearby mausoleum of Humayun, makes this austere and simple tomb, with its quiet and solitude, much more attractive, almost a place of reflection.
Bishop Heber was on a missionary trip. His primary purpose for his journey across India was religious. But he was also like the Forrest Gump or Lal Singh Chadda of his time. He met everyone of importance. In Delhi, on a cold, damp morning of 31st December 1824, Bishop Heber met Emperor Akbar Shah. This poor king was the successor of the famed Mughal dynasty, now fallen on hard times.
The unfortunate Akbar Shah, namesake of the illustrious Akbar the Great, who represented the zenith of the Mughal dynasty, ascended the throne in 1806 when the power and prestige of the Mughals were long gone. Akbar Shah is depicted in paintings as an anxious and perpetually alarmed person, as if a snake is about to sneak out from under a chair and bite him. His expression is not surprising. Born in 1760, Akbar Shah witnessed his father Shah Alam's brave journey back to Delhi and the Herculean efforts by his father and the formidable Mirza Jahangir Khan, who against all odds almost managed to restore authority to the Mughal throne. But the Mughal decline, after the untimely death of Mirza Najaf Khan from tuberculosis, was precipitous, and Akbar Shah witnessed the brutal blinding of his father Shah Alam by the merciless Ghulam Qadir. Akbar Shah himself, as a prince, was subjected to degrading treatment, including being forced to wear women's clothing, drink spirits, and dance for the abusement of the sadistic and deranged Rohilla chieftain Ghulam Qadir. But the nadir for the Mughals arguably came after the rescue from Ghulam Qadir by Marathas. The princes of the once mighty dynasty found themselves starving under extremely meager rations allocated by the Maratha governor, forced to sell trinkets and furniture to survive. They were eventually rescued from the Marathas by the East India Company in 1803 with the arrival of Lord Lake and Ochterlony. A dual rule was then created, an elaborate but obvious charade where the emperor pretended to act like an emperor, but all power lay in the hands of the company. This mighty empire had become an empire of shadows. Under the security of the East India Company, Delhi experienced a resurgence, but Akbar Shah was chafing under the strict thumb of the company and the persistent bureaucratic slights designed by the company to undermine his authority. The bishop, in his detailed accounts, highlights many of these indignities. Protocols and procedures were designed to belittle Akbar Shah, such as refusing him the customary courtesies previously extended to Mughal emperors and limiting his involvement in administrative affairs. By this period, it was an open secret within the company that the nominal Mughal rule was nearing its end. Bishop Heber entered Red Fort through the Lahori gate. As behooved a bishop, he was riding an elephant. He then passed through Chatta Chowk. This was designed by Ali Mardan Khan, based on a similar Chatta Chowk that he had constructed in Peshawar, and that was liked by Shah Jahan. The chalk itself has been much altered since. The side arches have all been walled up, but lately it has been restored into a beautiful market, just like it was in its heyday. Received with presented arms by the troops of the palace, Bishop Heber calls this the noblest gateway and vestibule that he ever saw. After passing through this long, vaulted aisle, all finely carved with inscriptions from the Quran, Bishop Heber met Captain Grant, the Mughals officer on guard, and a number of elderly men. Today it's really hard to imagine the Red Fort as it used to be. It really is just a shell. The inside was completely hollowed out by the British after 1857. But this painting shows something like what it must have been. After passing through Chatta Chowk, Bishop Heber came to an extremely dirty stable yard. Bishop Heber then passed through another richly carved but ruinous and dirty gateway, the Nobat Khana, where chants went out. Lo, the ornament of the world! Lo, the asylum of nations, king of kings, the Emperor Akbar Shah, just, fortunate, victorious.
The ceremonial gate, or Nobat Khana, is much altered. The side arcades were destroyed by the British. This is where, on 11th May 1857, 49 British civilians, women and children, were killed by the mutineers. The favorite son of Akbar Shah was Mirza Jahangir, whose tomb I saw in Nizamuddin, and the tomb that Bishop saw being constructed. Mirza Jahangir was a troubled man, and from this building he shot at the British resident Archibald Seton in 1812. He missed. Mirza Jahangir had a long-standing feud with Archibald Seton, who he called Lullu, which was a big insult in Urdu. Archibald Seton had him exiled to Allahabad. Eventually, Mirza Jahangir came back at the intervention of David Ochterlony, but then was re-exiled after he tried to poison Bahadur Shah Zafar. It was in the Diwan-e-Khas, or the Hall of Private Audience, that Bishop Heber met Emperor Akbar Shah. Today, from a distance, the Diwan-e-Khas looks like a pretty but somewhat indistinguished Mughal era building. It's hard to imagine what it must have looked like in its heyday. These paintings give us a glimpse.
Decorated shamianas provided shade. This courtyard was crowded with supplicants and animals of different kinds. This must have been quite a meeting. Bishop Heber was dressed in all his religious finery, being the representative of the church. Akbar Shah was completely wrapped up in shawls, being a cold morning. Bishop Heber describes Akbar Shah as pale, thin, and handsome, with fair and delicate hands. Standing next to him was his son and heir apparent, Bahadur Shah Zafar. It is hard to imagine what Diwan-e Khas must have looked like from close up on that day. Today it is off limits to visitors, but from close by you can see the stunning inlay work. We have some Mughal era paintings which show us what this place must have been like, with thick textiles, rich carpets, and an imitation peacock throne. This place was decorated to the gills.
This was an elaborately choreographed meeting. Every single thing was decided in advance.
After saluting the emperor in the Cornish, the Mughal fashion, Bishop Heber advanced and gave him a gift of 51 gold mohurs as a nazar. He then gave the heir apparent Bahadur Shah Zafar a gift of 5 more gold mohurs as a nazar. In turn, Bishop Heber was given a kelat, a ceremonial robe of honor, which he thought was completely worthless. Bishop Heber describes that everything was dirty, desolate, and forlorn. The walls were defaced, the doors and windows were in a state of dilapidation. Old furniture was piled in a corner, and torn, faded tapestry hung over an archway.
In the Diwan-e Khas, on January 27, 1858, Bahadur Shah Zafar was put on trial. He was charged with 4 crimes. 3 were nebulous. The fourth was very specific, that he was accessory to the murder of 49 women and children in the Red Fort on 11th May 1857. Almost certainly British knew that the charge was false, but the trial lasted 21 days and he was convicted on all charges without appeal.
Of course, the outcome was a foregone conclusion. In its closing statement, the prosecution emphasized their perceived generosity towards the Mughals and contrasted it with what they described as the emperor's treachery, labeling him this shriveled impersonation of malignity. The last Mughal emperor left Delhi on October 8, 1858. In an exact reverse of Bishop's journey, he was taken overland to Allahabad and from then on boarded a barge called Suma Flat, towed by a steamer Thames, and taken to Calcutta, where transferred to ship HM Megara to Rangoon, where he arrived on December 9, 1858. In the ultimate act of cruelty, this emperor, who was a great poet, was forbidden from using pen, ink, or paper during his trial in Delhi and his imprisonment in Rangoon, so he wrote his verses in charcoal on the walls of his prison. He passed away in 1862 and was buried in an unmarked grave.
Much of modern scholarship is focused on the legitimacy of the trial itself. As sovereign, Bahadur Shah Zafar was entitled to sovereign immunity. The trial itself was an astonishing breach of international law.
There was a lot more to see, including the Hall of Public Audience or the Diwan-e-Am, where Bishop Heber was struck by the Pietra Dure panels.
Behind the throne in Diwan-e-Am, there are some remarkable Pietra Dura panels said to be designed by Austin de Bordeaux. These were pilfered from the Red Fort after 1857. Lord Curzon, the great restorer, had them brought back from the museum in Kensington, but unfortunately not all pieces could be found. What you see today is a reconstruction.
This painting by Ghulam Ali Khan shows us what these panels must have been like. clearly European inspired. At the top center, there is a mosaic of Orpheus playing a lute, as a lion, a hare, a dog, and a deer listen enraptured at his feet. This Florentine image was supposed to show that in Shah Jahan's ideal rule, the lion could lay down with the lamb. Today, these images are very hard to see, almost out of reach.
This entire area was full of gardens. This little palace in the middle of a pond was built by Bahadur Shah Zafar. After 1857, when the entire fort was a barracks for the British, this pond was used as a swimming pool.
Bishop Heber was convinced, as were the British, that Mughal rule in India was at an end, that there was no sympathy in the hearts and minds of Indians for this ruined house. 1857 would prove the bishop and the British completely wrong. When Bishop Heber talks about the Mughal emperor and his court, he combines the typical early East India Company romantic sympathy for the Mughals with the revulsion that dominated later English descriptions. This marks a stark change of attitude of the East India Company towards the Mughals and comes at the same time as a change from an old interest in and respect for all things Indian to a weariness of Indian customs and a general distaste for everything Indian. When troops from Meerut decided to come to Delhi to declare Bahadur Shah Zafar as their emperor, the British realized very quickly something had to be done with the stores of ammunition in the magazine. This magazine was promptly blown up on 11th May, sometime in the afternoon, and it was that large explosion that marked the beginning of the war for most people. A plaque commemorates the British soldiers that died in the explosion. Below the plaque is a second plaque placed by Indians correcting the record. And Delhi is full of such monuments. Not too far from the magazine memorial is the Mutiny Memorial, a Gothic monument completed in 1863, likened to a badly drawn out telescope. I talked my way into the Mutiny Monument and climbed all the way to the top. Um, this much maligned monument gives you a good view of Delhi from where I am. There are many inscriptions on the Mutiny Monument that memorialize British that were killed or died during the siege of Delhi. There is even an inscription that is written in very British sounding Hindi. But the real star of the show, the real history lesson, is outside, where you can see an inscription in multiple Indian languages that was placed in 1972, correcting the history record, mentioning that the enemy of the British inscriptions were people who rose up bravely to fight against colonial rule and fought for the national liberation of India. Perhaps nothing illustrates better
the grandeur and eventual futility of the British imperial experiment more than the coronation monument in Delhi. This vast wasteland was once the site where Queen Victoria was proclaimed Empress of India. Multiple grand darbars were held on these grounds. This park is home to many abandoned British statues, refugees in a land that they once owned, including this noseless statue. There is also this grand statue of King George V. This statue once occupied pride of place at India Gate. Now, King George, without the benefit of a canopy, is slowly dissolving in the Indian sun and rain.